We are absolutely obsessed with self-improvement, right? We go to therapy, we journal, we meditate, all to build our quote-unquote authentic self. But what if I told you that the very techniques we use today were actually invented thousands of years ago for the exact opposite reason, to completely and totally renounce the self? Well, today, we're diving into the surprising history of you.
So think about it. We take it for granted that talking about ourselves is the key to improving ourselves. We put all our thoughts into words in therapy, we write them down in journals. But where did this incredibly powerful idea that turning our inner world into language can actually change who we are, where did that really come from?
Well, it turns out the philosopher Michel Foucault was fascinated by this exact question. He acted like an intellectual archaeologist, digging through these ancient texts from over 2,000 years ago. And what he found completely reframes how we think about ourselves today.
Okay, so to really get what he discovered, we need to understand one of his key ideas. Foucault argued that we use different technologies to shape our world. And no, he didn't just mean iPhones and computers. For him, a technology is basically any systematic way of getting something done. It's like a practical blueprint for action.
He identified four main types. We've got technologies of production to make things, technologies of sign systems, like language to communicate, and technologies of power to influence other people. But the one that really matters for us, the one we use on ourselves, is that fourth one, the technology of the self.
So here's the bottom line. Foucault saw self-help as this kind of toolbox, filled with specific techniques we use to change ourselves. And his big discovery was that the tools we're using today in therapy and journaling, they weren't invented for us. They weren't inherited. And their original purpose was radically different.
All right, so let's jump in the time machine. Our first stop is the Greco-Roman world. This is where Foucault found the original blueprint for self-improvement. And you're going to see it was built on a principle that is pretty much the mirror opposite of our modern obsession.
We've all heard the famous phrase, know thyself. We think of it as the ultimate piece of ancient wisdom. But Foucault found that for the Greeks and Romans, that wasn't actually the main event. The number one rule for living was epimeleia hauto, the care of the self. Knowing yourself was just a little piece of advice, a small tool in service of this much bigger, lifelong project, actively building and managing your life.
And this care was incredibly practical. Take the Stoic philosopher Seneca. Every night, he'd review his day, but not with a bunch of angst or guilt. It was more like an administrative audit. He was like a bookkeeper for his own soul, comparing his intentions to his outcomes. The goal wasn't to dig up his past, it was to correct his course for the future. This was all about self-mastery, not self-discovery.
But then, history takes a sharp turn. With the rise of early Christian spirituality, a completely new kind of technology of the self emerges, and the goal was no longer to master the self, but to break it.
The first of these new technologies was called Exomologesis. Now, this was nothing like Seneca's quiet, private review. This was a dramatic, public ritual. A sinner would literally prostrate themselves, wear rags, kiss the knees of the faithful, not to analyze their sins, but to physically and theatrically perform their status as a sinner. It wasn't about what you did, it was about what you were.
Foucault's quote here perfectly captures this new purpose. Self-revelation is at the same time self-destruction. The goal here wasn't self-improvement, it was self-obliteration, a kind of ritual suicide of your old, sinful identity performed for everyone to see.
So just look at the incredible contrast this lays out. The entire model of the self was flipped completely on its head. Where the Romans sought private mastery over their actions, the early Christians sought public renunciation of their very being. The focus shifted from what I did to who I am, and the goal changed from building the self up to tearing it all down.
But there was a second Christian technology. And this one is the direct ancestor of our modern world. It was called Exagoreusis. Inside monasteries, a monk had to verbally confess everything to a master, every single thought, every flicker of desire. The goal was to sacrifice your own will completely. And the method? Constant analytical verbalization. Sound familiar?
And here it is. This is Foucault's great reveal. He argues that this ancient monastic technique of constant analytical verbalization, it never actually went away. It just got a new job. This timeline lays out the whole story. First, you have the Greco-Romans seeking mastery through private review. Then, Christianity comes along, takes the idea of verbalization and aims it squarely at self-renunciation. Then comes the modern twist. We stole the technique, the verbalization, but we threw out the whole goal of renunciation. We repurposed this ancient tool for a brand new project, building the modern self.
This is the heart of Foucault's argument, right here. The modern human sciences, psychology, therapy, they essentially took a tool that was designed for spiritual self-sacrifice and gave it a secular, therapeutic job to do.
So here's the final piece of the puzzle. We are the direct heirs of this history. You could say the therapeutic couch is the modern evolution of the monastery. We still perform this constant verbalization, but we're not doing it to renounce ourselves. We're doing it to constitute ourselves, to build an identity that we see as authentic and happy.
So Foucault leaves us with a really provocative question. The next time you work on yourself, ask this. Are you building a new, authentic self, or are you just performing an ancient ritual of self-destruction, only with a modern script? It's something to think about.